The kitchen smelled of chicken soup simmering gently on the stove. Steam fogged the window panes, blurring the early evening light that spilled in from the backyard. Clara Evans stirred the pot slowly, her tired eyes following the lazy swirl of broth as if hypnotized. Her back ached from another 12-hour shift at the hospital, and the muscles in her legs screamed for rest. But rest was a luxury she hadn't tasted in weeks. Instead, she had spent every spare moment in this house, her mother-in-law's house, tending, serving, cooking, and watching over Margaret Evans as she recovered from hip surgery. "You forgot the parsley." The words, sharp and cold, landed behind her like a whip crack. Clara froze, spoon in hand. Her throat tightened, as if someone had pressed a hand around it. She turned slowly. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, her posture as stiff as the brace supporting her back. Even with her graying hair pulled neatly into a bun and her pale face still drawn from the surgery, she radiated authority. Her sharp blue eyes narrowed on the pot, as though the missing herb were a crime. Clara swallowed. "I'll add some now," she said softly, reaching for the little jar on the counter. But Margaret sighed heavily, shaking her head. "Honestly, Clara, it's the little details that matter. A soup without parsley? Careless." The word stabbed at Clara's chest. Careless. She wanted to defend herself, to say that she had rushed here right after her shift without even stopping at home, that she had been up twice last night helping Margaret to the bathroom, that she had canceled her anniversary dinner with Ben because Margaret had insisted she wasn't feeling well. She wanted to cry out that parsley didn't change the effort, didn't erase the sacrifices. But she said nothing. She stirred the pot quietly, blinking back the sting in her eyes. For 3 weeks, she had poured herself into caring for Margaret, hoping, naively perhaps, that it might bridge the distance that had always hung between them. But Margaret's approval remained out of reach. No matter what Clara did, she seemed to fall short. And yet Emily never did. Clara felt her jaw tighten just thinking about her sister-in-law. Emily breezed in once a week, always with flowers or chocolates, always dressed perfectly with her phone at the ready. She would spend an hour at most, chatting and laughing, snapping photos of herself at her mother's bedside to post online with captions about being the devoted daughter. And Margaret lit up every single time. The back door creaked open before Clara could stop her thoughts from darkening further. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. "Smells wonderful in here." Emily's cheerful voice rang out like the entrance of a Broadway star. The sharp click of her heels echoed across the tile floor as she swept into the kitchen, a bouquet of sunflowers cradled in her arm and her phone already in her hand. She bent down to kiss her mother's cheek. "How's my favorite patient today?" Margaret's scowl softened instantly, her face glowing like sunlight through clouds. "Emily, darling, you're just in time. I was telling Clara how important it is to pay attention to the little things. But you've always had an eye for that." Clara's hand tightened around the spoon. Emily laughed lightly, her perfect smile flashing. "Oh, Mom, I'm sure Clara's doing her best." She turned, her eyes grazing Clara like frost. "Don't worry, Clara, it takes practice. Caring for someone isn't easy. I've been learning that myself." Clara bit her tongue. Learning? Emily hadn't stayed one night, hadn't lifted Margaret from bed, hadn't scrubbed a single dish. Before Clara could speak, Emily lifted her phone and leaned closer to Margaret. "Smile, Mom." The camera clicked. Margaret straightened as much as she could, beaming as though she weren't recovering from major surgery. "Just capturing these precious moments," Emily said, already scrolling through the pictures, editing, selecting. Margaret sighed happily. "It's so nice having both my girls here. Though Emily always knows just how to make me feel special." The words pierced Clara like shards of glass. Both her girls. Special. She had been here every single day, every single night. She had given up everything these last weeks. And yet, in Margaret's eyes, Emily was the golden one. Her chest burned with anger she couldn't hold in any longer. "Special," she blurted, louder than she meant. "She drops by once a week, takes a few pictures, and leaves. I'm here every day, making sure you have everything you need." The kitchen went silent. Emily's smile didn't waver. If anything, it grew brighter, her voice honey-sweet. Clara, I didn't realize this was a competition. We're all doing our part, in our own way. Clara's lips trembled. Some more than others, she muttered, turning back to the soup. Her chest throbbed with regret, but she couldn't take the words back. Later that night, in the guest bedroom, Clara sat on the edge of the bed with her phone pressed to her ear. The lamp cast a dull glow across the room, highlighting the exhaustion etched into her face. Ben answered on the second ring, his voice warm but weary. Hey, honey, everything okay? Clara's throat tightened. No, she whispered. I can't do this anymore, Ben. I'm exhausted. I've been doing everything for your mom, everything, and she doesn't even see it. Emily shows up for an hour, and suddenly she's the perfect daughter. There was a pause on the line, followed by Ben's sigh. Clara, you know how Mom is. She's always been like this. You can't take it personally. Not take it personally? Clara's voice cracked, frustration spilling out. Do you know what it feels like to give everything, every ounce of yourself, and still be invisible? She pressed her hand to her eyes, fighting back tears. I just needed you to understand. Ben's voice softened. Clara, maybe you need a break. Come home for a few days. Let Emily step up for once. I miss you, and you need to take care of yourself too. The thought of leaving, of resting in her own bed, of Ben's arms around her, sent a wave of longing through her chest. But guilt quickly followed. What if she needs me? Clara whispered. She'll manage, Ben said firmly. You've already done more than enough. It's okay to step back. You're not a bad person for taking care of yourself. Clara closed her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go. I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The morning sunlight spilled through the blinds in thin, sharp lines across the guest bedroom floor. Clara Evans woke with a dull ache in her shoulders, a heaviness that had nothing to do with sleep. The last night had been restless. Every creak in the old house, every faint groan from Margaret, had woken her at least twice. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A glance at the screen made her stomach twist. Emily's name flashed insistently. Clara ignored it. She had learned over weeks that her sister-in-law's calls rarely demanded her attention, unless it was for approval or attention-seeking. Clara rose slowly, stretching her stiff muscles. She moved quietly, careful not to wake Margaret, who had insisted she could sleep a little longer. Margaret, she knew, would never admit that she relied entirely on Clara's constant presence. The kitchen smelled faintly of the soup Clara had left simmering the night before. She stirred it absent-mindedly, her mind replaying Emily's smug smile and Margaret's dismissive praise. Special. Both her girls. Special. The words kept echoing. Clara had poured everything into this house, her energy, her nights, her patience, and yet the recognition she longed for seemed to always go elsewhere. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door clicking open. She didn't need to turn her head. Emily had arrived. Again. Morning, Mom. Clara. Emily's voice carried a practiced cheerfulness, one that Clara had learned to recognize as weaponized charm. She set her handbag down, adjusting her perfectly styled hair. I brought your favorite pastries. I thought it'd be a nice treat. Margaret smiled instantly, the warmth on her face reserved only for Emily. Oh, Emily, how thoughtful. You always know what I like. Clara's jaw tightened. She kept stirring the soup. She wanted to shout that she had been cooking and cleaning and lifting Margaret all week, that her hands were raw from constant work, that she hadn't even had a day off in weeks. But the words stuck in her throat. She had learned over time that arguing with Margaret and Emily together was exhausting and ultimately pointless. Emily noticed Clara's silence and tilted her head, a small smirk brushing her lips. Everything okay, Clara? You seem tense. Clara's fingers tightened on the wooden spoon. I'm fine, she said through gritted teeth, her voice quieter than she wanted. Right, Emily said, voice dripping with faux sympathy. I just hope Mom gets the best care, you know. That's all that matters. Clara's mind flashed back to the last 3 weeks. Every sleepless night, every canceled plan, every minor sacrifice she had made, all invisible in Margaret's eyes. And now, Emily, who barely stayed an hour at a time, got the credit. Her hands shook slightly as she set the spoon down and walked to the counter. She needed to focus on something tangible, something that reminded her she was here for the right reasons. She chopped vegetables for lunch, trying to ignore the tension that filled the room like smoke. Margaret, meanwhile, had settled into her chair, folding her hands on her lap. She looked at Emily with a mixture of pride and indulgence. "You always know how to make me feel appreciated, Emily." Clara's stomach twisted. She wanted to snap, to remind her mother-in-law that she had been the one present day after day. But she swallowed her words. She had tried so hard to maintain composure. She had tried to let patience guide her, but the constant comparisons were wearing her down. The morning wore on, filled with the usual choreography. Clara helped Margaret with light stretches, adjusted pillows, and made sure she had everything within reach. Emily flitted between her mother and her phone, occasionally commenting on the lighting for the perfect photo. By noon, Clara had had enough. She stepped outside onto the small porch for a moment of quiet, breathing in the crisp air. Her hands were still raw from cleaning, and her arms ached from lifting and helping. Yet even in the brief solitude, her mind churned with frustration. "I've given everything, and it's never enough." She opened her phone, scrolling through messages from Ben. His encouragement warmed her, but it also reminded her of home, the life she had set aside to care for Margaret. She wanted to stay, she told herself, because it felt like the right thing to do. But at what cost? The front door clicked behind her, startling her. Emily leaned casually against the doorframe, her phone in hand. "Taking a break?" she asked, voice laced with mock innocence. Clara turned jaw tight. "I needed a moment," she said firmly. Emily smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, don't overwork yourself. Mom likes it when things run smoothly. I'd hate for her to think you're slacking." Clara's patience snapped. She felt a hot surge of anger and resentment, the kind that had been simmering under the surface for weeks. "Slacking," she said, voice sharp. "Emily, I've been here day in and day out, taking care of Mom. I've given everything I have. And yet somehow, it's never enough. You stroll in for an hour, take pictures, and somehow that counts as perfect care." Emily blinked, caught off guard. Then her expression hardened. "Clara, I don't know why you're being so dramatic. We're all doing our part, and I'm just trying to help in my own way." Clara's fists clenched. "Your way isn't helping, Emily. You're here for the spotlight, not for her. I'm the one who's been here every single day, while you were off living your life." Emily's voice grew cold. "Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, you'd realize that it's not a competition. You're taking everything personally, Clara." "No," Clara said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I'm taking this personally because I've given my all and been invisible. Because every hour I spend caring for Mom is dismissed, while you get all the credit." Margaret stirred, looking between them. Her expression was a mixture of mild surprise and irritation, as if Clara had broken some unwritten rule by speaking out. "Enough, both of you," she said, voice firm. "Clara, stop being so dramatic. Emily is helping in her own way. And Emily, don't encourage this theatrics." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She turned silently and went to the guest room, needing to collect herself. Sitting on the bed, she called Ben. His voice was calm but immediately attentive when he answered. "Hey, Clara. How are you holding up?" "I can't do this, Ben. I can't keep giving and being invisible. Emily walks in for an hour, and suddenly she's the perfect daughter. Everything I do seems to go unnoticed." Ben's sigh came through the phone. "Clara, you've been extraordinary. You've done more than anyone could ask. Maybe it's time to step back for a bit. Let Emily manage, see if she really can. You need rest too." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to stay. She wanted to make a difference. But the thought of repeating these past 3 weeks, the exhaustion, the comparison, the feeling of being unseen, made her chest ache. I'll think about it," she said finally. Later that evening, Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about all the missed moments, the empty hours, the long nights. She thought about Emily's smug smile and Margaret's selective praise. And she realized something she had been trying to ignore. Maybe it was time to stop sacrificing herself for someone who couldn't see her worth. For the first time, she considered the possibility of leaving, even if only temporarily. Even if it meant facing guilt, confrontation, or disappointment. And deep down, Clara knew that once she made that choice, nothing would ever be the same. The next morning came heavy and gray, as if the sky itself mirrored Clara Evans's mood. Rain tapped softly against the window panes, a rhythm both soothing and suffocating. Clara lay awake long before the alarm on her phone buzzed. Sleep had evaded her, replaced by an endless reel of Margaret's dismissive words and Emily's smug smile. When she finally rose, she did so with mechanical movements. She dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, her body aching with a familiar weight of exhaustion. Downstairs, Margaret was already awake, propped up with pillows in the recliner. A morning talk show flickered on the television, its laughter track a stark contrast to the silence in the room. Clara moved through her routine, preparing tea, checking medications, arranging the breakfast tray. She placed the tray carefully on Margaret's lap, waiting for even a flicker of gratitude. But Margaret merely nodded. "Thank you," she said, her tone flat. Clara forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She wanted more than words. She wanted acknowledgement, recognition. Something real. Moments later, the front door swung open. Clara didn't need to turn to know who it was. Emily's laughter filled the air, light and breezy. "Morning, Mom. I thought I'd bring you something sweet." She held up a pink bakery box tied with ribbon. Margaret's face lit up instantly. "Oh, Emily, you didn't have to." Clara's stomach twisted. She had spent her morning preparing breakfast with care, and yet it was Emily's pastries that earned a glow of delight. Emily placed the box on the table, then moved to her mother's side. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair from Margaret's forehead like an actress playing to the crowd. "Better, now that you're here," Margaret said warmly. Clara bit down on her tongue. She couldn't bear another repeat of yesterday, another round of invisibility. She excused herself quietly, retreating to the porch for air. The rain had eased into a drizzle, dampening the wooden steps. Clara sat on the edge, wrapping her arms around herself. She could hear faint laughter from inside, Margaret's laughter, a sound she hadn't heard directed at herself in weeks. Her phone buzzed. It was Ben. "Hey," she answered softly. "Hey, sweetheart. How are things today?" Clara hesitated. "The same." Emily showed up. Mom lit up like Christmas morning. Ben sighed. "Clara, I'm serious. You can't keep doing this. It's breaking you. You need to come home. Just for a while. Let Emily take some responsibility." Clara's throat tightened. But what if she doesn't? What if Mom struggles? "Then maybe she'll finally see how much you've been doing," Ben said gently. "You can't prove your worth by destroying yourself." The words sank deep. She knew he was right, but walking away felt like defeat, like abandoning her duty. "Just think about it," Ben urged. "Please." Clara promised she would, but when the call ended, guilt flooded her chest. That evening, as she folded laundry in the guest room, she overheard Emily in the living room. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll be here more often now. You know I'd never let you go without. You're my top priority." Margaret's voice floated back, warm and adoring. "I always knew I could count on you, Emily." Clara's hands stilled on the fabric. Her vision blurred. She wanted to scream. She wanted to march into the room and lay bare every sacrifice she had made, every hour she had poured into keeping Margaret comfortable. But she knew it would only be dismissed, minimized, brushed aside. So instead, she cried quietly into the folded towels, her tears soaking into the cotton. 2 days later, Clara made her decision. She waited until Margaret was resting, the rhythmic sound of her breathing filling the room. Emily had just left after another brief visit, leaving behind a bouquet of roses and the lingering scent of her perfume. Clara packed her bag in silence. A few changes of clothes, her toiletries, her phone charger. The act felt both liberating and terrifying. She left a note on the kitchen counter, her handwriting steady despite the storm in her chest. Margaret, I've done my best these last weeks, but I need to take a step back for my own health. Emily will take good care of you, I'm sure. I'll check in soon. Clara. Her hands trembled as she set the pen down. When Ben pulled into the driveway that evening, Clara climbed into the car without a word. He took one look at her tear-streaked face and reached for her hand. You did the right thing, he said softly. Clara stared out the window, watching the house shrink in the distance. It doesn't feel like it. Back at her own home, Clara felt both strange and relieved. Her bed welcomed her like an old friend, the sheets cool and crisp. Ben wrapped his arms around her that night, whispering that he was proud of her, that she wasn't alone. But even in the safety of home, guilt lingered. What if Margaret struggled without her? What if Emily used Clara's absence as ammunition? What if Margaret believed that Clara had abandoned her? Clara's chest ached with the weight of those questions. Meanwhile, at Margaret's house, the reality of Clara's absence quickly set in. Emily arrived the next morning with her usual energy, pastries in hand. But within hours, the cracks began to show. Margaret needed help standing, and Emily fumbled awkwardly. She needed medication sorted, and Emily mixed up the times. By afternoon, frustration flickered in Margaret's eyes. I thought you said you could manage this, she muttered. Emily forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed her irritation. I can. It's just a lot. Margaret sighed, wincing as she shifted in her chair. For the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into her expression. Back at home, Clara received a text from Emily that evening. Thanks for leaving all this to me. Mom's upset. Maybe should have thought twice before walking out. Clara stared at the screen, her chest tightening. She wanted to reply, to defend herself, but Ben gently took the phone from her hand. Don't, he said firmly. You've carried enough. Let Emily handle it. Clara closed her eyes. She wanted to believe that stepping away was the right choice. But as guilt gnawed at her and uncertainty clouded her mind, she realized something. This battle wasn't just about caregiving. It was about worth, about being seen, about proving, maybe to herself most of all, that she mattered. And she knew the real storm was still coming. The house felt different without Clara. Quieter, heavier. The soft hum of order that she had maintained was gone, replaced by small but growing signs of chaos. Margaret Evans sat in her recliner, staring at the untouched breakfast tray on the side table. The eggs were cold, the toast overdone. Emily had meant well, but Margaret couldn't help comparing it to Clara's careful preparations. The way she always made sure the tea was just the right temperature, the way the toast was buttered evenly, not rushed. Mom, you barely ate, Emily said, her tone light but her smile strained. It's hard, Margaret admitted. You know I like my tea a certain way. Emily sighed. I'm doing my best. It's not like I have endless free time, you know. I rearranged my whole schedule to be here. Margaret flinched at the edge in her daughter's voice. She looked away, fiddling with a blanket draped over her lap. For the first time, a seed of doubt grew inside her. Had she taken Clara for granted? The cracks in Emily's care. By the third day, the cracks widened. Emily missed the timing on Margaret's afternoon medication, distracted by a phone call. That night, Margaret felt weak and dizzy. You forgot the pills, she whispered, fear lacing her voice. Emily's face flushed. It's just one time, Mom. Stop making it sound like a disaster. But to Margaret, it was a disaster. Clara had never forgotten. Not once. The next morning, Margaret struggled to get from her chair to the bathroom. Emily tried to help, but she was impatient, tugging too quickly, nearly making Margaret stumble. Slow down. Margaret gasped. Emily huffed. Mom, if you just try harder. Margaret froze. Those words stung. Clara had never spoken to her like that. Clara's touch had always been steady, patient, respectful. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She realized how much she missed Clara, her quiet competence, her gentleness, her unwavering presence. Clara at home. Meanwhile, Clara tried to reclaim pieces of herself at home. She cooked dinner with Ben, took long showers without interruption, even slept for more than a few hours at a time. Yet, she felt restless. One evening, as she watered the plants on her porch, her phone buzzed. A message from Emily. If you cared at all, you wouldn't have left Mom like this.
She needs you.
I can't do everything. Clara's hands trembled around the watering can. She wanted to scream at Emily's hypocrisy. She had been doing everything. But instead of replying, she showed Ben the message. He read it, jaw tightening. She's unraveling. Let her. Don't go running back just because she's drowning. She needs to face what you've been carrying. Clara nodded, but guilt gnawed at her. What if Margaret suffered because of Emily's failings? Margaret's awakening. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, memories flooding her mind. Clara bringing her tea in the middle of the night when pain kept her awake. Clara adjusting her pillows without being asked. Clara staying up late, eyes weary but never complaining. Margaret swallowed hard. She had mistaken silence for lack of care. In truth, Clara's silence had been strength, a strength she had leaned on without gratitude. When Emily came into the room the next morning, disheveled and irritable, Margaret spoke with a steadiness she hadn't used in years. Emily, called Clara. Emily blinked. Why? Because I need her. Margaret's voice cracked. I need her. Not just anyone. Clara. Emily's face flushed with anger and humiliation. So, after everything, you're choosing her over your own daughter? Margaret's eyes glistened. I'm not choosing her over you. I'm admitting the truth. She's been here, giving me everything she had. And I pushed her away. Emily's chest rose and fell with fury. You don't know what you're saying. But deep down, she knew Margaret was right. The call. That afternoon, Clara's phone rang. It was Margaret. Clara, her voice wavered, fragile. I was wrong.
About so much.
Can you come? Please? Clara's throat tightened. She had dreamed of these words, yet hearing them brought no triumph, only a bittersweet ache. I'll come, she whispered. The confrontation. When Clara walked into the house the next morning, Emily was already there, pacing like a storm. So you came back? Emily spat. Of course. Mom snaps her fingers, and you obey. Clara set her bag down calmly. I came because she asked, not because of you. Emily's eyes narrowed. You think you're some kind of martyr, don't you? Playing the perfect daughter-in-law while making me look bad. Clara's hands shook, but her voice was steady. I never tried to make you look bad, Emily. I just did the work that needed to be done. Work you walked away from. Margaret's frail voice cut through the tension. Enough. Both women turned. Margaret's eyes, usually soft and weary, burned with clarity. I've been blind, she said, her gaze fixed on Clara. I let myself believe that words meant more than actions. Emily brought me flowers and pastries, but you, her voice cracked. You gave me your health, your time, your peace of mind. And I ignored it. I ignored you. Tears filled Clara's eyes. She had longed to hear this, yet part of her still couldn't believe it. Emily's face twisted. So what? You're just going to praise her and tear me down? Margaret shook her head.
No.
I love you, Emily. But love doesn't erase truth. And the truth is, Clara has carried me when no one else would. Including you. Silence thickened the air. Clara finally spoke, her voice trembling. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I cared. But being invisible, it broke me. Margaret's lips quivered. You're not invisible anymore. Not to me. Not ever again.
Healing.
The weeks that followed were different. Emily, stung by the confrontation, pulled back from her daily visits. Clara remained, but this time on her own terms. She set boundaries, scheduled rest days, time with Ben, moments for herself. Margaret respected those boundaries, sometimes insisting Clara sit with her just to talk, not to serve. One afternoon, as Clara poured tea, Margaret reached for her hand. I need you to know, Margaret whispered, that I see you now. I see everything you've done. And I'm sorry it took me so long. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you, she whispered back. For the first time in weeks, she felt light. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was finally seen. The quiet triumph. Months later, Clara walked through the garden behind the Evans home. The flowers were in bloom, the air fragrant with spring. Margaret sat in her chair on the porch, a blanket across her lap, watching Clara with a smile. Emily had not completely disappeared. She called occasionally, visited when she could, but she no longer held the power she once did. Clara paused among the roses, breathing in their scent. For so long, she had fought silently for recognition, for dignity. Now, she had both, not through shouting, but through enduring, through truth finally breaking through the fog of neglect. She wasn't invisible anymore. And in that quiet triumph, Clara found peace.